Hello and welcome to episode 35 of The Best Games Period. We were on a little bit of a hiatus because last week we had some technical difficulties and lost the show. This week, obviously, because you're listening, we did not have technical difficulties and we did not lose the show. So buckle in and get ready to listen to a rousing episode about the medieval fantasy game, about rumbling cell phones, and dragons, Dragon Age Origins from BioWare. But before we get into that, how are you doing, Jeremy? You're the only one with me here today.
Yep, no Daniel. Somehow we'll survive, I would imagine.
No Daniel, no Emily, just you and
just
me.
You and me. And the internet.
Well, yeah, but we don't talk about them.
No, we make them sit in the closet. I'm doing pretty well, Jack, for the most part. Just same old stuff.
Same old stuff. Have you been able to play anything, or has it been pretty busy? I know you've been kind of moving and shaking.
I feel like I've been moving for a long time now. But yeah. I downloaded No Man's Sky, but I haven't played it yet.
Okay.
At least I think it's finished downloading. And other than that, I've been playing Pokemon Go, and that's about it. What about you?
I've been playing a fair bit of No Man's Sky, which is definitely one of the more interesting games I've played this year. And part of that is because of the game itself, and part of that is because of kind of the hype that grew around that game prior to release, and now the people who were hyping it are kind of dealing with it being a real thing.
Funny how that happened.
But I do have to say, I'm glad it's not another Spore. Did you ever play Spore? Were you?
I did play Spore. I didn't play it, a lot, but I played it.
But do you remember, the lead up to that game?
Yeah.
For those of you who don't remember, Spore was a game released on PC a long time ago, and the lead up to that game was basically promising that it was going to encompass the entirety of existence into one game.
Correct.
And people bought into that. 100% bought into it. Oh my gosh, you start out as a single-celled organism, and then you evolve up into a civilization, and then you become a spacefaring race and travel among the stars and go to the center of the universe and discover all the mysteries. And it really could not live up to that hype.
No. That's the reason I bought that game, actually, was because of the hype. I guess I could say the same for No Man's Sky.
Yeah. To No Man's Sky's credit, there is actual fully fleshed out gameplay in it. Whereas Spore was just kind of a weird patchwork of mini games that escalated to flying your starship around the universe. And that was kind of fun. But it was just kind of... It was very hollow after the whole hype about it basically being the Jesus of video games.
Yes, a bit of a letdown.
Yeah. I have a feeling some people are going to feel that way about No Man's Sky and other people aren't. At least that's kind of the feeling I'm getting.
The lines are pretty well drawn already on that game, it seems. It's weird. People seem to love it or hate it.
Yeah, and the people who hate it, I don't... Because my personal take on it so far, I've probably poured about 10 hours-ish, maybe more into it. My personal feeling is that it's really good. It's a really good game. It's not, the greatest game I've ever played. I mean, it's no BioShock Infinite, but...
well, nothing is.
and it's no Last of Us, but it's pretty good for an indie game. The ambition there is really... kind of what sells. They tried. They really tried to do something big, and I think in some ways they succeeded, and in other ways it kind of falls a little bit short. But I mean, that's to be expected.
Do you get the sense it's kind of, even though it's new worlds and pretty much unending, do you get the sense that it's going to get old pretty quick?
I get the sense that not pretty quick, but I was watching Jim Sterling's impressions on No Man's Sky just because I was curious what other people were saying about it. And he said something that kind of hit it on the head, I think. Basically, you need to be able to suspend your disbelief and just kind of buy into the universe that Hello Games has made in No Man's Sky and be able to glaze past the fact that obviously the randomization elements are pulling from a pool of, different animal bits to create new aliens and different biomes for planets that aren't necessarily drastically different, but it tweaks like the color scheme, and there's slightly different animals and slightly different plants. And so you need to be able to kind of just buy into that stuff.
Okay.
I think some people can't do that, and they're the people who hate it. And then there are some people who are like 100% on board with the discovery and are able to just kind of get past the fact that there is this limited pool of different animal parts and things like that, which sounds out of context very grisly. I don't want a pool of animal parts. But
not a literal one, no.
Right. But I have heard they're not going to be releasing DLC for it. They're going to just be periodically patching it with updates that are free for everyone. And I think the extent to which they support it with patches, as it goes forward into its life out in the wilderness, I think that could really help it. There were some people talking about how they're going to add base building. I think that would be great. I think it would be great if they added a system that allowed you to save planets or, set a home planet and build stuff there and be able to find your way back to it, because once you leave a star system, it's very hard to go back.
And all these are going to be free updates and patches?
Yes.
So a lot of that will probably depend on sales. I mean, sadly, how much of that they do.
Right.
They're not going to be generating any extra revenue from it.
Right, that's the thing. And I also think, if they increase that, going forward, if they increase that pool of randomized elements, just periodically releasing new animal parts to kind of draw from, new animations, new creatures, I think that could go a long way towards helping it be a more engrossing experience.
Yeah, because I don't want to travel to all 18 quintillion planets and then just end up with the same basic characters with different color schemes. Yeah.
I do have to say, there's a part of the game for me that makes it really hard to explore, and that's I'm a completionist, so I like being able to be like, I've done everything on this planet, time to move to the next one. But the planets are almost quite literally planet-sized. So actually discovering everything on a planet would probably take a very, very, very long time.
See, I'm one of the people that likes to, complete everything and explore, but if it literally takes too long, then we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm excited to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those games that, if you have any interest in space, if you have any interest in kind of exploring and sci-fi, I think it's super interesting. Hey,
I'm the guy that spent probably 90 hours in the Mako driving around empty planets in Mass Effect, so it might be right up my alley.
Honestly, that is a pretty accurate assessment of how it feels sometimes when you're going around on these planets. So I think you might get a real kick out of it. I think you might like it a lot.
Well, cool.
But
that's not why we're here. And speaking of EA-produced games,
BioWare, and just 2 years after the first Mass Effect came out, we got ourselves a high fantasy strategic RPG that kind of became an action RPG later on. It kind of was a very nebulous genre category in Dragon Age Origins.
Indeed.
So, what did you play Dragon Age Origins on?
I played it on the PS3.
Okay.
And I remember you played on PC, correct?
Yeah. So I'm really interested to hear about your experience with the game, because I've never played it on console, and I know it's very different from how I experienced the game.
I think different basically in the UI, correct? The way you play the game, the way the it kind of has that wheel like Mass Effect 1 had.
Okay.
As far as how you pick your different powers and combat and whatnot. Again, I feel like I say this all the time on the show. You got to remember, I wasn't a real experienced gamer at the time, so I didn't know any difference, right?
Right.
Like, I thought it worked really well, and I thought it was pretty cool. I liked how, you could kind of do the top-down tactical type thing, but then the fighting would be in real time. Speaking specifically of that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back during the time how a lot of people said it played terribly on console compared to PC, which I suppose if you're used to PC games and used to games that have powers with cooldowns and things like that, and you're used to a mouse and keyboard setup for that, I can understand it now since I've played games like that on PC. Mm-hmm. But at the time, it didn't bother me at all. I thought it worked just fine.
Well, and obviously some people agreed with you because pretty much all the future BioWare games after Dragon Age, after that port from PC to console, kind of oriented themselves towards console.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dragon Age 2 was a much more action-oriented game. Mass Effect 2, entire combat was revamped. So I think I want to say that it's Blue Point.
Blue Point?
The developer that moved it from PC to console.
The original Dragon Age?
Yeah.
Didn't they come out at the same time? I
You're
think
right.
it was the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it had a very long development time, and it's entirely possible that they delayed the PC version because the game started being developed in 2002.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, you know what I was thinking of? They released a different version several months later for Mac, and that was developed by a different person, different company.
Okay.
Anyway.
To be fair, that happens a lot anymore, so it's easy to get confused.
Right. I for some reason I thought it was the developer who has been working on moving current gen games to like Xbox 360, PS3 stuff. One of them is Blue Point. I don't know why I thought about that one, but
that's an interesting business model, like for a studio. I mean, there's a lot of business in that now. You could really stay busy full time doing that these days.
Yeah, I think a lot of developers are using that as a way to kind of gear up to do their own projects, to get some income, some money in the war chest, as it were.
Yeah, ha ha ha. Good one.
Anyway, yeah. So on PC, it played more like almost a turn-based strategy game. You had to move, like, position all your characters. You could pause time and kind of plan out different moves, and then kind of unpause time, see how they all played out, and then pause it again whenever you really felt like it. And I feel like it was more action-oriented on console, where you could do that, but it was less direct control over all your characters and more control over a single character, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could do that as well on console, and again, I didn't really know the difference at the time, and it didn't really bother me. But looking back, I can see that there definitely would have been a difference. But yeah, you could pause and you could select what you wanted all of your characters to do, and then you would pretty much unpause, and they would kind of all do it. And you would set up their, kind of like the Final Fantasy 12 Gambit system, or Kingdom Hearts has this as well in a way. I'm sure other games do too. But you could set it up so, they use certain spells or potions or whatever when they get to a certain point, or when there's a certain type of enemy, or if somebody's attacking you. And you would spend a whole lot of time setting that up, and it just didn't always seem to work quite right. They'd always burn through all the potions real fast, so you've kind of found yourself just doing everything individually, switching back and forth between the characters. And that took some getting used to, but once I got it down, it was fun. I liked it. It did play, tactical action in a way. Not quite tactical espionage action, but it had elements of both, a traditional action RPG and a tactical RPG at that point. And once... It took me a while. I was pretty frustrated early on in this game. I couldn't figure out how to play it.
It has a really big learning curve, and it's really difficult. I don't blame you.
That first demon thing that you fight, like, I probably had to do that 10, 12 times before I figured it out. And it was actually pretty easy, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue.
Well, I remember kind of going through that game with relatively little difficulty, but then I hit a part, I believe it's in the forest area, where there's a kind of, you can choose between the side of the elves or the werewolves. And there's a part in there where you go down into this ruin, and there's a dragon. And I don't even think it's an adult dragon. There's just this dragon down there, and you have to fight it. And I died so many times to that. I probably spent like 5 hours trying to kill that dragon. It was very frustrating. So,
do you remember what your origin was? What you started out as the first time you played?
Yeah, I like playing. I've played this game probably like 5 times. And I really enjoy playing as the I can't remember the term, but basically the outcast elves.
The Dalish.
The Dalish. That's right.
That's what I was.
The Dalish. I like the Dalish. I think they're neat.
I always kind of root for the underdogs. Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, I finally remembered, and actually, the company I was thinking of is called Edge of Reality.
Okay.
And they did program the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of Dragon Age Origins, but they came out at the same time as the PC.
Okay.
And they haven't really been known for a lot of the stuff that they've done. I think probably the most high-profile thing they've published independently was a game called Loadout.
Okay.
And that was in 2014. But they also did the porting of Mass Effect to PlayStation 3.
The original Mass Effect?
Yeah, a few years back.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, a little connection to an earlier episode. They're founded by the lead programmer of Turok Dinosaur Hunter. So, there you go, Daniel. You get a little shout out for Turok in this episode.
It all comes back around. 6 degrees of BioWare.
Seriously, though, BioWare is connected to, like, all the companies.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see a flow chart on that.
It actually would. Especially now that they're owned by EA.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of EA, which made me think of business practices, no judgments on good or bad business practices, mind you, but Dragon Age Origins was one of the first games I remember encountering that had DLC for it.
And some kind of crap DLC.
Hmm?
Some of it, yeah, me too. But the one that I remember the most is having to pay to get a bigger chest so you could stash more loot.
Yeah.
That was kind of a bummer. I did it because I like loot.
So there are 3 games I remember were the first games I remember playing that had DLC. It was Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion,
Horse Armor,
Mass Effect, and this game, Dragon Age Origins. I actually think that at the time it came out, there had only really been one DLC that I'd played that was actually worth playing, and that was Bring Down the Sky for Mass Effect, which is a mission pack about stopping an asteroid crashing into a planet, which I thought was pretty neat at the time.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Dragon Age Origins has a lot of really cool DLC in it, though.
Yeah, I ended up buying a lot of it, and just the one that stands out as the one that I thought should have been in the game.
Well, that's the horse armor of
Dragon Age.
It's just a chest.
And I'm pretty sure people referred to it as that back in the day, too.
But, I mean, like, there was some really cool stuff. Like, I remember there's a DLC pack that adds a new character who's like this giant golem who's kind of snarky that you find in a random village that it's been frozen for decades. There's another one that adds like a keep that you can kind of make your home base. There's another one that basically lets you play as the invading evil monsters and overthrow the good guys.
Was that one the Darkspawn Chronicles?
Yes.
Yeah.
I never played that one, though, but I always liked the idea that it existed.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a bunch of really great stuff, kind of memorable. And then it also had Dragon Age Awakening, which was a full-on huge expansion that came out like a year later.
Yeah.
And I actually found that really interesting. But I suppose we should probably dive into the story stuff of Dragon Age Origins before we... I think I just put the cart in front of the horse. Is that the expression?
I think so. I think that happens, though, on this show sometimes. It's kind of the nature of how we flow.
Yeah, we flow backwards.
Well, we're like that one river. Yeah.
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 That one.
That one.
You know the one.
Yeah, I don't want to say it because I'll probably be wrong, but yeah.
Yeah,
like the Amazon? The Nile? One of those ones.
The Red River? I don't know.
Yangtze? Yellow? It's
Yellow
some
river?
major
Blue
river.
one? I don't know. Maybe the green one.
Who knows? But there is a river that flows backwards.
Yes. Somewhere. Look it up.
Yes.
We're not here to teach you geography.
So the story of Dragon Age and the Darkspawn and the Grey Wardens, Jack, can you tell this in any sort of
I can give it a shot.
Coherent fashion? Okay.
I can give it a shot. So at the beginning of the game, you create a character, and you can pick any one of several backgrounds. There's like the Dalish opening, there's the City Elf opening, there's the human noble, several different human variations, several different dwarf variations. And after playing through kind of an intro sequence, each one of these winds up with your character being drafted into the Grey Wardens, which are kind of this little known but highly respected organization, and their job is basically to keep the world safe from these creatures called Darkspawn, and that live deep underground and come from who knows where, and there seems to be an infinite number of them. And most importantly, though, the Grey Wardens kind of stand watch in case a blight breaks out. And a blight is when all the Darkspawn from down below find a great dragon, wake it up, and then take it to the surface to kind of conquer the world, essentially. And the important thing about the dragon is that dragons can't really be killed by mortals. They can't be killed by normal people. So what needs to happen is Grey Wardens... a Grey Warden is necessary to strike the final blow. Otherwise, the dragon can't be killed. And you're drafted into the Grey Wardens, and you are taken basically to fight this giant army of Darkspawn. And on the way there, when you get to the battle camp, you're basically subjected to this trial that all Grey Wardens have to go through. And pretty much everyone who's with you in the trial dies. A horrible death.
Yeah, so when you become a Grey Warden, you either make it or you die.
Right. And so it's being conscripted into the Grey Wardens by necessity or, whatever, is usually a last resort for anyone. Because you generally don't want to join the Grey Wardens just to immediately die.
Correct.
And the ritual itself involves drinking Darkspawn blood. And, again, not the most pleasant thing in the world. But you survive. You survive, and then you go off to kind of fight these Darkspawn. And there's some questions about, is it a blight? We don't know if it's blight. We haven't seen a dragon yet. But there's a bunch of Darkspawn up here, so we have to fight them. And you're in the kingdom of Ferelden. And the king of Ferelden kind of has these dreams of glory and honor and all that great stuff. But as you're given the task to light this tower to signal when reinforcements should go in. And so you fight your way up to this tower, and you manage to light it. And then the General Logain, who's leading the reinforcements, doesn't go in to reinforce the king and leaves him to die. And then a dragon attacks, right? A dragon attacks and brings you away. Something like that.
As I recall, yes.
Okay. This is... I'm going into way too much detail. But essentially, General Logain betrays the king, which throws the entire country into turmoil. And on top of that, there's this invading army of Darkspawn that was not successfully defeated. And all of the other Grey Wardens in the area have basically been killed except for your character and this other character named Alistair. And as Grey Wardens, it's your duty to fight the Darkspawn, so you basically go around Ferelden trying to collect all of the different factions who might be able to come help stop these monsters.
And it's now officially a blight.
It is, yes.
The fifth blight, to be exact.
The fifth blight. And on your journey, you learn about the weird politics of Ferelden and the world. And, like, for example, mages are complemented by Templars. And Templars are essentially magic-resistant humans who keep the mages in check so that mages don't run wild and destroy everyone with their awesome cosmic abilities.
Start doing the blood magic.
Yeah, or go crazy and start doing blood magic, which is very dangerous. And you encounter these different moral dilemmas, like a young boy possessed by a demon. Do you just kill the boy to save the kingdom, or do you try and save the boy, or do you kind of give in to the demon's, temptations and of power? These are all different things you encounter throughout your journey, and it's really interesting and in-depth and really complex.
Yeah, the story is really good and in-depth and complex, and it bothers me that I can't just recall it instantly like that, because it really kept me enthralled throughout the game, but it has been, 7-8 years?
Yeah, I mean, it came out in 2009, so it's been 7 years since it released. And not only that, but two full-fledged Dragon Age games between now and then.
This is true.
So you have to bring all these factions together to fight the Darkspawn, and in the process, you might have to do things that your allies disapprove of. So sometimes you'll actually get such a low disapproval rating from your companions that they will leave you. Or make it very clear that they hate you. And I think that the first Dragon Age has a really kind of interesting cast of characters. You got, like, a bisexual assassin. You have a bard assassin. Or a former assassin bard.
Yeah.
Sorry. You have kind of this wandering warrior from a far-flung continent that belongs to a race called the Kunari, who have a very interesting, mysterious culture that you can't really understand. You have a enigmatic witch who exists outside of the Templar mage dynamic and is kind of considered a rogue apostate. All these different characters, and there's another one. There's Wynn, who's this kind of elderly grandma healer.
I like Wynn.
Wynn's great. I like all the characters in this game, and you know what? If you talk to anyone about the characters in this game, you're gonna find someone who's like, "Oh, Alistair was the worst. He's such a whiny baby."
I know.
I never felt that way about Alistair, and I don't know. I felt like he was having a reasonable reaction to all of the terrible things going on.
Well, plus he knew something that nobody else did about himself, specifically throughout most of the entire game. So all of this impacted him on a more personal level than I think most of us realized. He was sarcastic and smart-assy, but I always liked Alistair.
Yeah. I mean, like, there are a lot of things he could have handled better.
Well, sure.
But, I mean, I feel like that it makes him a flawed character, and that's okay. It's okay for a character to have flaws. I really like almost everything about Dragon Age Origins. I think the story is very straightforward in general. Basically, you're on a quest to kill a dragon.
Yeah, the archdemon.
Yeah, the archdemon. And that that straightforward quest comes with all these little twists and turns and interesting quirks and unique lore stuff, which is kind of why I was sad to see David Gator leave BioWare, because I know he worked hard on the Dragon Age franchise. He's not working there anymore, but I think he really helped make Dragon Age one of their tentpole franchises. Because I think a lot of people forget that that BioWare, before Mass Effect and Dragon Age, was kind of all over the place doing really... They didn't really have franchises, per se. They had different ideas that they executed, and then they moved on to the next thing. And I think with Dragon Age, they created a world with such deep lore that was theirs, entirely theirs, that they were able to keep delving into it for multiple games. I think that was a good investment.
Yeah, and I think, I think that Dragon Age 1 spent a lot of time and did it in a way that made the game flow, even though there was this overbearing, sense of doom. You got to defeat this archdemon and all these things come along, but it gave you time to get to know your companion characters, so you truly kind of did care about them. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Mass Effect 2 did with their companion missions, and that affected the outcome as to whether or not they ultimately made it in the final mission to a large degree. And also it had that you had to try to please them all at the same time, which isn't easy. But even like in Inquisition, there were like Leliana. She's one of my favorite characters, and just that little bit that she was, that small role she played in Inquisition, it wouldn't have made near as much. I mean, I wouldn't have cared about that near as much if it hadn't been for Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff.
They do such a good job in the Dragon Age franchise of building up the universe and having kind of those interconnected moments. Like, Morrigan tends to appear, or at least Morrigan's mother appears in all the Dragon Age games. Mm-hmm. And there are really interesting... I'm not going to say that there are interesting consequences that carry over between the games, but I feel like each game kind of pits really interesting moral quandaries to players. Like, for example, at the very end of Dragon Age Origins, remember, we spoil everything on this show. If you don't want things spoiled for you, play the game, then listen to this show later. But at the end of Dragon Age Origins, you basically find out that the Grey Warden who strikes the killing blow on the dragon dies.
Yeah, it's a suicide mission.
Yeah. And one of your companions, Morrigan, the apostate witch, basically comes to you the night before you're going to assault the archdemon and is like, hey, I actually have some magic that can get you out of the situation. We just need to, we need to bump uglies and make a baby, and I can put the archdemon's soul into the baby when you kill it, and you won't die.
And the baby will be mega powerful? Wasn't that kind of the thing?
The baby will have the soul of an old god.
Yeah. It'll be a demigod, I believe, is what she called it.
It'll be something that hasn't ever existed in the world.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Which is scary. Because you still don't, you're still not entirely sure about Morrigan at that point. At least I wasn't.
I'm still not entirely sure about Morrigan
exactly.
after 2 more games. So.
Good point.
So what did you do with that scenario?
Well, the first time I played it, I didn't pass it off on any of the other Grey Wardens. Mm-hmm. Because you can actually choose somebody else, I believe, to deal the final blow. If I remember right. I guess I could be wrong. That doesn't make sense considering Dragon Age 2. But anyway, I did it myself. I didn't do the dirty with Morrigan.
I gotcha.
What about you?
The first time I played it, I didn't either, and that was just because it seemed super sketchy.
I thought it was going to backfire no matter what.
I was just like, there's no way this can be a good idea. Even though it's one of those things where it's like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
But the second time I did, just because I wanted to see what would happen. And nothing really that different happens at the end.
Except you live.
What? Yeah, except
you live.
Except that you live, obviously.
So my question was always, how did she have a baby in the course of a few hours? Like, doesn't she disappear to the, what do they call the fade? Like, right after that?
Yeah, basically, I think she somehow was able to ensure that she would get pregnant, and then she... You remember the mirror in the beginning of the Dalish quest?
Mm-hmm.
She basically uses something like that to escape into the ether.
Yeah.
Ancient Dalish magic.
Yeah. So did anything ever come of if you did it that way? Like, did, was there...
I think there were some lines in Dragon Age Inquisition that referenced if you did it or not. I think either way ended up getting the soul of the archdemon.
One of the videos I watched today mentioned that a lot of people, and this video came out right before Inquisition, and it was somebody kind of telling the Dragon Age history, starting with Origins, and they had mentioned that a lot of people felt that the Inquisitor was actually that child.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I never really got that, but could be, I suppose.
I mean, it's not, because Morrigan shows up in Inquisition with a kid.
Yeah.
Who's presumably that kid.
You would think so.
But, I mean, he's a very strange kid if it's not due to, old god soul inside of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, I mean, just that we can have a conversation like that. Like, we just spent like 5-6 minutes talking about a decision we made in Dragon Age. And there are many, many, many different choices that you can make in that. Like, did you side with the mages or the Templars? Did you side with the werewolves or the elves? Or did you manage to broker a peace? Or did you, like, who did you side with in the Dwarven kingdoms? Like...
Yeah. Yeah, who was king after that? Yeah, that was... Yeah, I mean, it just... The side stories are almost as good as the main story. But it flowed. It didn't... Like, in other games like that, and this kind of happened in Inquisition for me a bit as well. I got too distracted by the side stuff and wasn't too concerned about the main stuff. In Origins, it just... You could do all that in the context of the game, and it didn't feel like you were neglecting your mission to defeat the archdemon. It just felt like it was part of the natural flow of it.
Yeah, and it
really stuck out that way.
Well, and it constantly reminded you that this was an impending threat. Throughout the game, locations that you visited changed over the course of time because the Darkspawn invasion was getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
If any time you went to your map as the game progressed, you could see where the Darkspawn forces were, and like one of the villages you visit really early on in the game, Lothering, ends up being completely consumed and unvisitable after you go there because the Darkspawn have taken over that area. You can't go through their battle lines.
I still have that little cloth map that came with the game, and I actually used that thing the entire time I was playing it.
Really? That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I just had it on Steam, so I never got the physical box.
Yeah.
But that's what you miss out when you go digital.
And I don't even think I got the collector's edition. I think it was just part of... Maybe it was a pre-order reward. I don't know. But I got it.
Yeah. Do you remember the process you had to go through to buy the DLC for Dragon Age Inquisition? Dragon Age Origins?
Yes, I believe that's the only reason I actually started a BioWare account. That
was so weird.
That was weird.
So basically you had to create a BioWare account online. You had to go online
on the internet proper.
BioWare.com.
On a PC proper.
Yep. And go through that, because at the time, the infrastructure for DLC wasn't really there.
Yeah.
and that was the best way that they could kind of link the DLC to your game account. And it also used... It was at the time when, like, that fake currency stuff was super popular with online companies, so you couldn't just buy a DLC pack for the actual amount of money it was. It was like...
You had to get points?
Yeah, you had to get BioWare points or something.
Yeah.
Some BS like that.
Yeah.
And then you paid for it and usually had some points left over or something. That what are you going to spend them on?
And then didn't you have to go back to a certain part in the game to, like, and have a conversation to trigger it or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very cumbersome and weird, but I guess it worked because I enjoyed a lot of the DLC, so I can't complain too much.
And DLC these days is pretty fluid, for the most part. And that was, I guess, just part of the process of getting DLC to become a thing. I remember people being really mad, and some people still are about DLC in general, but just,
I'm glad
shipping an unfinished game. They knew that they wanted to put this in there. They could have just put it in there. They had 7 years to develop this game, type of stuff. I remember reading tons of those comments.
There's like it's a no-win situation right now with games.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
and now they don't support their games after the fact if they're not releasing DLC every week.
Or it's like, well, you should have put this in. You should have put this in the game. Just waited a little bit and put it in. It's like No Man's Sky developers got death threats for pushing it back for 2 weeks.
For delaying their game just a tad. Yeah,
it's like, what? Okay, what's the win scenario? They're gonna get death threats either way, so they might just do whatever they want.
And then all the people that played the game before it was actually released with the patch, just, this game's trash.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Maybe it's time for another Blight. Maybe that'll get us all caring about the right things. But yeah, DLC has kind of evolved quite a bit. And I'm glad it's not nearly as cumbersome as it was in this game. But it was good DLC. I think I got the first 3 or 4 up into Awakening. I never got Awakening, but I got the 3 or 4 before that.
Did you ever play Awakening?
No, I did not play Awakening.
Okay. It's interesting because Awakening kind of sets the groundwork for Inquisition.
Okay.
Like, it deals with intelligent Darkspawn and kind of where they come from, and sets up Anders from Dragon Age 2.
Okay.
It actually did quite a lot of stuff in there. It's kind of its own little self-contained game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a full-on expansion, right?
Yeah. I guess we're kind of getting to the point in the podcast where we give our assessment.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, why don't you go first? I'm interested to hear what you think.
I think one thing I want to mention about Dragon Age Origins, I think I would be wrong for not mentioning this, is I actually thought the game looked like crap. I honestly did. When I first played it, everything looked kind of flat. Like the one thing that sticks out is early on in the game, at least as a playing as a Dalish elf, there's somebody in your village, and I don't even remember who it is, or your clan or whatever, and she's wearing like this, really nice dress with this really nice necklace type pendant, but there was like no texture to any of it. It was just like all flats, and I'm like, wow, that looks pretty terrible. I mean, I don't know that the entire game was like that.
But that's like one of your first impressions of the game. It's hard to shake that.
Yeah. It was like, wow, this is kind of weird. And then, I realized that the game had started development in 2002, and I'm like, oh, well, it's, not that big of a deal. But yeah, that kind of stood out to me. It doesn't really bother me. It didn't really bother me then. It just stood out.
Yeah.
But I think...
well, I mean, just on the visuals, I do think this game has not aged very well.
No.
It looks like, even the color palette, it's very brown. I think it came out during that time period where all games were brown for some reason.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gears of War.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because brown equals gritty, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder if some of that had to do with also just early development on the because there was a big leap between Xbox and 360 and PS2 and PS3 as far as what consoles could do.
True.
I mean, really, there was.
True.
And I wonder if some of that was they put resources in other areas first.
And kind of.
I don't know. I'm just wonder if that's why that first portion of that generation of consoles, everything kind of did look like it was just.
I mean, that's a good point. The reasoning behind it is debatable, and I'm pretty sure they had a good reason, but at the same time, it's not the most pleasant game to look at.
So aside from the game just not looking that great to me, I thought everything else about it was amazing. I actually, the combat took me a while to figure out, but once I did, I liked the way it worked, even on console. The characters and the story, and even I would say, I don't know, Dan likes to use this term, set piece moments in the game were pretty great. There were lots of twists and turns to the plot that, may just seem like generic fantasy stuff now, but at the time, I hadn't experienced a lot of that, so it was pretty intriguing to me. There's characters such as Alistair that you tend, or at least I wasn't in love with him at the beginning, and by the end I was, kneeling to him. Like medieval type fantasy, I guess, wasn't something that I was really into a lot before this game, but I became pretty infatuated with it after this game. The whole dynamic between the different tribes, like the city elves hating the Dalish, and the Dalish kind of being the outcasts because they live in the woods and in clans, and they're kind of like, I don't know, gypsies, I suppose. Always on the, just living a different way of life. The same thing happens kind of, between the human nobles and the commoners and the dwarves and whatnot. Like, there's just some of these real world type elements thrown into it.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of, like, racial undertones and discrimination going on that you can draw a lot of real world parallels to. The game doesn't make it super explicit, of course, but it's like
it's not the focal point of the game, but it's definitely there. I love going back to camp and just talking with the other characters and getting to know them. The dialogue I thought was great. The voice acting I thought was pretty amazing. And overall, I really enjoyed it. It was one of those, it's a game that probably took me at least 80 hours to beat, but I did it really quickly. I just could not stop playing it. I just wanted to keep playing and playing and playing. Mm-hmm. And of course, I tended to do everything that could be done in it. And if, I became a much better, tactical action type role-playing gamer after playing this game and spending a lot of time with it. So if I had it to do over again, I would certainly go back and play this game, and I suggest others should too. For me, it is a best games period.
Okay. I agree with you on a lot of those points. Visually, it has not aged well. It's obviously aged a little bit better than like Knights of the Old Republic or Jade Empire. It is harder to go back to, but I feel like it came out right at kind of the cutoff point where a lot of kind of the upcoming generation of gamers will be able to go back to, if that makes sense. I feel like going forward, it will still be accessible. Like, people won't be off-put by how blocky and pixelated everything is, and it will be the voice acting and kind of cinematic approaches will be accessible, I feel like. I do have a question for you, though. What was your favorite kind of decision point throughout the game? Like, did you struggle with any? Did you have to kind of set the controller down and think about a decision?
Well, I was pretty proud of myself for making peace with the werewolves, because
that's almost by definition, that's pretty difficult to make peace with werewolves.
It is. It's been so long since I played. I really should have refreshed a little bit more. leading up to the part where you have to choose whether, how you're going to handle the archdemon, who's going to deal that final blow, and if you're going to sacrifice yourself, more or less, or make somebody else sacrifice themselves, or do the deed with Morrigan. That took me a few minutes to decide. It did, and I suppose I had to sit there and think about it, but it wasn't one of those where I sat my controller down, walked around town, called grandma, reminisced about life and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm, and I've always kind of been a self-sacrificing kind of guy in video games. Like, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I'd rather do it myself than force somebody else to do it just so I can live, because I don't think I would be able to live with myself had I done that.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, I guess, those ones, there was a moment in, what's the area called where you're in the dwarven underworld?
Orzammar.
Yeah.
Or the Deep Roads.
There was, in the Deep Roads. There was something there that stands out, but I can't recall exactly what it was, which is sad.
Was it there in the Deep Roads? There was kind of like a long lost dwarf son who had kind of been mutated a little bit. Was it that guy?
Maybe. It seems to me you find some information maybe about one of the current leaders, and you can choose whether or not to expose it and take them down.
Yeah.
Which would cause mass chaos, most likely.
Right.
Or you can just kind of tuck it away and keep going. I think. I can't remember.
No, you're right. You basically get the option to choose between kind of the establishment dwarf ruler or the upstart.
Yeah.
I personally, my favorite moment in Dragon Age Origins was the part towards the end where you have to deal with Loghain and make him...
And that, by the way.
make him answer for his treachery. And that situation can play out so many different ways. Like, credit...
Yeah, because after the Darkspawn invasion and the Grey Wardens kind of get their butts kicked, he completely throws them under the bus, even though he was very much there. And then he ends up seizing power by becoming basically the king regent, or whatever you would call it.
Yeah.
And then becomes this total tyrant a-hole. Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's a DLC called Return to Ostergar, which has you returning to the site where Loghain betrayed the king and kind of the aftermath of that battle. And it turns out that he kind of made the right decision to not commit all those troops to the battle.
Yeah.
So there are lots of shades of gray where he knew his king wasn't doing the right thing, and so he did what he thought was in the best interest of the kingdom. And is Loghain really a bad guy, or is he a crazy general, or, and then what do you do with him? Like, because obviously he did something terrible either way.
Yeah.
And
so what did you do with him?
I think originally I had him executed, either executed or, I might have sentenced him to become a Grey Warden and live the rest of his life out in the deep roads fighting Darkspawn. I forget if that's an actual option or if I'm just making that up in my...
Well, I know there were options. I'm pretty sure I chose to have him executed. I'm not sure what the second option entirely was.
There is a way where you can basically...
Well, you can recruit him to the Grey Wardens, and if you do, Alistair leaves your team.
Right.
So I guess maybe that second option you're talking about is pretty accurate.
I think that's where a lot of people lost their patience with Alistair, just because I feel like a lot of people were like, felt like if they were the main character, they would have been able to take Alistair aside and just been like, "Listen, guy, either you or I, as the last two Grey Wardens here, have to kill the Archdemon. Yeah. Why don't we
I got a plan for this dude.
Why don't we just make him a Grey Warden and then have him kill the Archdemon, and then neither of us has to die?"
Did we know at that point whether Alistair was going to be... did we know that he was the
king? Or related to the king?
Yeah, the heir?
Yeah. I think we did. That might have come up, like, right after the fact.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch. There's like a flurry of decisions towards the end there. Like,
yeah, a lot comes at you pretty quick.
And I felt like that entire section is masterfully done. Like, if it sounds confusing just hearing us talk about it, imagine how confusing it is for the writers to keep all those different storylines straight.
Yeah, for sure.
On the back end, like the web of, dialogue choices must have been insanely huge and complex. But stuff like that, moments like that where they went to extreme lengths to make their world not black and white. There are very few decisions in Dragon Age Origins that are clear cut. And almost every decision you make, there's an argument for it and there's an argument against it. And you can make either argument and it's still right.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to what you see in the game. Because, like, for example, I've had a lot of people, when we're talking about Dragon Age, talk about how they're 100% for the mages because the mages are oppressed by the Templars.
Yeah.
And my take on it is I'm 100% for the Templars because if you're a normal person living in the Dragon Age world and there are people walking around who can vaporize you in a ball of fire by just thinking about it.
Yeah, there needs to be some regulation there. they need to be kind of held in check.
I think you want the Templars around.
Yeah.
And so the bureaucracy of the Templar mage kind of relationship is really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a neat dynamic. I agree.
Yeah, and I like that then becomes, without venturing too far into Dragon Age 2, I like that becomes one of the central conflicts in the second game because that is a really interesting dynamic. But so I love this gray fantasy world that visually is brown, and I'm using a lot of color talk in this episode. But I think more than anything, the narrative triumph of Dragon Age is really what sets it apart. Like, yeah, the graphics aren't 100% the greatest. Some of the presentation is off. There are some strange visual glitches at times. Sometimes the textures pop in. And the gameplay, I actually really like the gameplay in Dragon Age Origins, especially on PC. The kind of strategic tactical RPG gameplay is something I really missed in Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition because those became increasingly kind of action RPGs. And
yeah, they became more controller friendly, and console friendly.
And Dragon Age Inquisition is almost MMO like in its
combat.
It
is. Yeah.
And the franchise has moved further and further away from what I find satisfying as gameplay. Mm-hmm. But in Dragon Age Origins, I feel like it hits a real nice sweet spot where I was usually had a decent challenge, but it wasn't too daunting to make me want to stop or get stuck for hours and hours on end, except for that one time. So I have to say yes. I think we kind of talked about how it's a little bit of a missing link. For DLC, yeah, but also for just BioWare in general, I think it opened up their eyes to the potential of consoles, and that's why we have more streamlined games like Mass Effect 2 and 3, or Dragon Age Inquisition. And, I think for better or worse, generally the changes have been for the better.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So we are in agreement. Huzzah!
We have come to consensus.
And if Daniel were here, he would probably also say yes. But
I'm sure. I don't think he ever played this
game. He hasn't played it, so
yeah.
We're taking our opportunity as he is out camping and gallivanting with his adorable daughter and lovely wife.
Hopefully he's not getting stalked in the woods by some creature at the moment.
By a werewolf.
Dark spawn.
So usually, again, usually Daniel closes us out. So I was kind of waiting for him to.
I can give it a shot if you want.
Yeah, go for it. Wait, I need to talk about Extra Life first.
Okay.
So before we close out, I'll just say a little bit about Extra Life. Extra Life is basically like walking a marathon for charity. Who walks a marathon for charity? I don't know, but some people run marathons for charity. But with Extra Life, instead of doing either of those things, you sit down or you lay down. I don't know how you play video games, but you do that, and you play them for 24 hours. And each person who signs up to do this gets to choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital they are supporting, and 100% of everything they raise from friends, family, or strangers goes directly to that hospital to pay for medical expenses for sick and injured kids. It's really the greatest thing. Like, you get to play games, you get an excuse to play games for a long time, you get to have a blast, and you get to help sick and injured kids all at the same time. It's amazing. It's like 100 different wins. It's all the wins you could ever want. So head on over to extra-life.org, get signed up, and get playing and helping kids.
This year, Jack, you really could do the charity walkathon and Extra Life at the same time if you play Pokemon Go.
That's so true. That's a great
just
point.
Walk around for 24 hours and catch Pokemon, and you would technically be doing both.
I probably would not advocate doing 24-hour walking.
I wouldn't either, but I'm just saying it's possible.
I assume that would be unhealthy, right? Maybe?
I mean, you would think so. I mean, Forrest Gump ran for how long? He turned out all right, I suppose. But yeah, in general, I don't think we're all Forrest Gump. Yeah, I need to stop making Forrest Gump references. Yeah, so, Jack.
Jeremy.
It's been a pleasure hanging out with you tonight. Internet fan, please, if you enjoyed this show, please check out more of our shows. You can find us at The Best Games Period on Libsyn, iTunes. We have a YouTube channel that we use once in a while. Jack also posts all these articles on the aforementioned Extra Life.
You can find those articles and the show over at community.extra-life.org.
I mean, you could listen to the show and maybe do some donating, find a team while you're there.
Yeah.
We're all on Twitter. Our show Twitter is at Best Games Period. Jack's Twitter is at RiverboatJack. Daniel is at IndieJones84. And I am at MojoMonkey_12. So please download, listen, comment. You can comment to us on pretty much any of those venues I just mentioned.
Subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave us a review.
Please do. That would be fabulous. We really appreciate hearing feedback from the people that listen to the show.
You're all wonderful and handsome.
You are wonderful. And we appreciate all the downloads and that you actually like listening to us ramble on about games week after week. It means a lot to us. On that note, Jack.
Jeremy.
Have a great evening, a great weekend.
You too.
And go Team USA. It's Olympic season.